The microphone gave a slight screech, but my mother-in-law, Meredith's, voice didn't falter. It cut through the air, as crisp and sharp as the crystal glasses around us. We were on a rooftop overlooking Central Park, celebrating the launch of my husband's family's newest real estate venture, the Apex Tower. A grand name for a project that I knew, intimately, was more style than substance. Meredith stepped down from the small stage, a perfectly rehearsed smile on her crimson lips, and glided toward us. My husband, James, straightened his posture beside her, the perfect air, and I, as always, was the awkward accessory. "Darlings, what a night," she purred, her eyes scanning right past me as if I were part of the hired catering staff. A cluster of investors and society columnists drew near, and Meredith held court. "This is my son James, the brilliant mind behind it all." James smiled, a weak, watery smile that never quite reached his eyes. He shook hands, accepted the accolades. Then, one of the columnists, a man in designer glasses, turned his curious gaze to me. "And who is this lovely young woman, Meredith?" I felt the air thin. This was the moment. The moment Meredith would choose, as she always did, to put me in my proper place. "Oh," she said, with a dismissive little laugh, placing a hand on my arm with a grip that was anything but friendly. "This is Clara, a dear friend of James's." A friend. The word echoed in my mind, drowning out the string quartet playing softly in the background. Not his wife, not his partner, not even his girlfriend. A friend. An anonymous +1. I looked at James, pleading with my eyes for a shred of decency, a simple correction. He just stared at the gleaming architectural model of the tower, pretending to be fascinated. But he wasn't. He was running. Again. The humiliation was a cold wave that washed over me. Meredith and her circle moved on, leaving me standing beside a tray of hors d'oeuvres, utterly invisible. I could see the sideways glances, the whispers, the heir's friend, the piece that didn't fit the puzzle of old money and Ivy League legacies. For years, I had swallowed it. I swallowed Meredith's constructive criticism about my wardrobe, which wasn't designer. I swallowed the time she forgot to include me in family photos at their place in the Hamptons. I swallowed the dinners where she'd reminisce about James's perfect ex-girlfriend, a girl from a good family. And James would always plead for patience. "That's just how she is, honey. Just let it go." It was costing me my dignity. And tonight, looking out at the sprawling city lights below, something inside me snapped. The shame that was supposed to burn me to the ground was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I wasn't the piece that didn't fit. I was the entire game board, and they just didn't know it yet. My eyes swept across the room, past the smug faces, and landed on a man sitting in a cordoned-off VIP area, someone everyone had been trying and failing to approach. Mr. Sterling, the lead investor whose fund was backing 90% of the Apex Tower, the real power on this rooftop. Meredith thought he was here because of her family's prestigious name. James thought he was here because of his own slick sales pitch. They were both catastrophically wrong. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and began to walk toward him. The friend was about to introduce herself. Each step I took toward that roped-off area was a drumbeat, a silent announcement that Meredith's one-woman show was over. From the corner of my eye, I saw her face twist into a mask of confusion and annoyance. Where does that insolent girl think she's going? James made a move to grab my arm, then stopped, hesitant as always. His courage only ever seemed to work when I was the target. As I approached, Mr. Sterling, a man in his 60s whose quiet demeanor commanded more respect than any shouting ever could, looked up from his glass of scotch. For a fraction of a second, his eyes, accustomed to analyzing billion-dollar spreadsheets, studied me. And then something no one on that rooftop had seen all night happened. He smiled, a genuine, broad smile that lit up his entire face. "Clara, my dear girl, what an extraordinary surprise!" He stood up, a gesture that made the other powerful men at his table sit up a little straighter. Meredith and James froze a few feet away, their expressions of disbelief hardening like plaster. Mr. Sterling ignored her and gave me a warm hug, the kind one gives a favorite niece. I had no idea you'd be here. If I'd known, I would have insisted you join us from the very beginning. Meredith, recovering from the shock, glided forward with her plastic smile firmly back in place. Arthur, how gracious of you. I see you've met Clara. She's a dear friend of James's. She was trying desperately to reframe the situation to insert herself back as the central figure connecting everyone. Mr. Sterling turned to her, the friendly smile still on his lips, but with a glint of steel in his eyes. Meredith, with all due respect, your description is a little incomplete. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Please, Clara, sit. How long has it been since we've had a proper chat? Not since the symposium in Geneva, I believe, I replied, my voice coming out calm and steady as I took the seat. That simple act felt like a checkmate. Meredith didn't back down. She let out a laugh that sounded like shattering glass. Geneva! How lovely! Clara has always been such a go-getter. Did you do some work for his firm in the past, dear? An internship, perhaps? I always say, it's so important for young people to start at the bottom, to appreciate things. The silence that followed was heavy. Mr. Sterling picked up his glass, swirled the ice slowly, and looked at Meredith like a patient professor about to correct a stubborn student.
Meredith, he began, his voice low, but everyone nearby strained to hear it. Clara was never my intern. When I met her nearly a decade ago, I was managing a mid-risk portfolio at another firm, and she was a junior analyst nobody was listening to. One day, she brought me a predictive analysis model she'd built herself, an algorithm that didn't just predict an asset's risk, but the resilience of an entire sector under stress scenarios. It was brilliant, visionary. James swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. He knew pieces of this story, but I had always downplayed it so as not to wound his fragile ego. Mr. Sterling continued, his gaze now sweeping over the model of the Apex Tower. I left that firm a year later to found Sterling Capital, the proprietary system we use to this day, the very foundation of our multi-billion-dollar investment strategy, the reason we have the liquidity to fund projects like this one. He paused for dramatic effect, then turned his face to me. Is built on the model Clara created. We call it the PRISM method internally. And she licensed it to me for a share of the profits that was, frankly, a steal. The world of Meredith seemed to crumble in silence. The friend, the intern, the girl who wasn't our kind of people. So to be clear, Mr. Sterling concluded, now addressing a ghostly pale Meredith directly, Clara isn't a friend of your son who happens to be here tonight. Clara is the reason my capital, and by extension, your family, are here tonight. A waiter approached hesitantly. Mr. Sterling waved him over. Bring Miss Evans the same champagne from my table, the Vintage Reserve. He turned to me, completely ignoring my paralyzed in-laws. Now tell me, my dear, what do you really think of this venture's prospects? The story is just starting to heat up. If you're already enjoying this twist, take a moment and subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss what comes next. Now, let's get back to Clara's answer. The champagne arrived in a tall, slender flute, its bubbles fizzing like my newfound anger. Mr. Sterling watched me, a flicker of genuine curiosity in his eyes, awaiting my answer. So, Ms. Evans, your honest opinion. I took a deep breath, ignoring the toxic presence of Meredith and James, who were hovering like a pair of gargoyles. It's an ambitious project, Arthur, I began, my voice the calculated tone of an analyst. The location is prime, the design is striking, but the capital structure is aggressive. It's highly leveraged, and the sales projections seem overly optimistic for the market cycle we're heading into. It's a beautiful ship, but it's sailing toward a storm with too few lifeboats. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. He knew I wasn't just talking about the market. I was talking about the risk James's company posed to his money. I saw a shiver go down my husband's spine. Meredith, however, couldn't stand being irrelevant for another second. She forced a laugh, a sharp, unpleasant sound. Well, aren't we serious? always so focused on work, aren't you, dear?" She moved closer, her words dripping with syrupy venom. "But it's wonderful you can put all that hard work in your past now. It's lovely that all that hard work in your past gave you a good foundation. But today, thankfully, you have James to take care of everything, don't you? To give you a comfortable life away from all these spreadsheets and worries." Ah, there it was, the attempt to redefine me. No longer the friend, but now the trophy wife, the woman with an interesting past but whose present was one of complete dependence on her provider husband. It was the only narrative her class-obsessed brain could compute. And James, my husband? He adjusted the knot on his tie, a sheen of sweat on his forehead. He looked at the floor, the ceiling, the architectural model, anywhere but at me. And in his deafening silence, the revulsion I felt bloomed into absolute clarity. It wasn't the first time. I remember the Christmas she gifted me an etiquette book, so you'll feel more comfortable in our circles. I remembered the trip to the Hamptons when they put me in the attached guest cottage while the family stayed in the main house. I remember every comment about how lucky I was to find a man like James who could elevate me. And every single time, James had remained silent. His excuse was always the same. "Just let it go, Clara. It's just her way. Let's not make a scene." But there already was a scene, and I was the only one getting hurt in it. I was done being the one to let it go. I set my glass down on the table with a soft click and turned to Meredith, a cold smile forming on my lips. "You know, Meredith, you talk about my hard work as if it were a disease I was cured of. But the difference between my hard work and your position is that my work gave me value. Your position only gave you a last name." The air grew thin. Meredith's smile faltered. James stepped forward. "Clara, please!" "No, James," I said, my eyes still locked on his mother. "Let me clear something up for your mother since you never had the courage to." I turned back to the petrified matriarch. "You judge me for my past, but you're terrified of my present. You look at me and you don't see an equal. And you know what? You're right. We're not." "How dare you?" she hissed, her face a mask of fury. "I dare because I know the exact worth of every penny I have because I earned it. I didn't marry into a fortune. I didn't inherit an empire built by others. And yet here we are, at the same exclusive event, drinking the same expensive champagne. The difference is if all of this vanished tomorrow, I would know how to rebuild. Would you?" The blow landed. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Fear that I was something she couldn't control, something that didn't fit into her neat social boxes. But she had one last card, her most venomous one.
She leaned in, her smile returning, cruel and triumphant. "You talk about earning, about building. A lovely speech, darling. But let's be honest for a moment," she whispered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "That little consultancy of yours, that charming little office in Soho, my son pays for that, doesn't he? It's an expensive hobby he funds so you can play at being independent. At the end of the day, you're still just an expense he can afford." And there it was, the final insult, the silver bullet meant to destroy me. And then I laughed. Not a small, contained chuckle, a full, genuine laugh that turned heads. Meredith's smirk vanished. "What's so funny?" I wiped an imaginary tear from my eye. "What's funny, Meredith, is how little you know about your own family. How little you know about your provider son." She eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" My gaze locked onto James, who was now as pale as a ghost. "You think he supports me? Meredith, that's the best joke I've heard in years." I turned to Mr. Sterling, who was watching the exchange with the keen interest of a strategist. "Arthur, do you remember when James's company, Epic's Development, nearly went bankrupt 3 years ago, when he poured everything into that disastrous project upstate and lost all his working capital?" Mr. Sterling frowned. I vaguely recall the rumors. I thought they secured an angel investor at the last minute. I smiled, a smile devoid of any humor. They did. My gaze snapped back to James, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. You want to know what's really funny, Meredith? Your son's company, the foundation of your family's pride, was 2 weeks away from filing for Chapter 11. That's a lie, she snarled, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Is it? I asked. Then why don't you ask James, who wrote the $8 million check that cleared the debts and recapitalized the company? Ask him which account the money came from. Meredith turned to her son, her eyes demanding an answer. But James was mute, paralyzed by the exposed truth. I'll save you the suspense, I said, rising from my chair. The money came from my account, from the profits I made licensing the PRISM method. I'm not an expense James supports, Meredith. I'm the creditor who owns his debt. Epic's development isn't your son's empire. It's my most poorly managed, high-risk investment. Meredith's world shattered into a million pieces. The humiliation on her face was a masterpiece of poetic justice. Her heir wasn't a king, he was a debtor, and the gold-digging friend was in fact his silent savior, and now his greatest threat. James finally found his voice, a pathetic whisper. Clara, let's talk about this at home, not here. I turned to him, and for the first time, he saw that there was no love left in my eyes, no patience, only contempt. No, James, you don't get to decide where and when we talk anymore. You lost that right when you chose to stay silent. I turned to Mr. Sterling, who was watching the exchange with the keen interest of a strategist. Arthur, it was a pleasure seeing you again. Thank you for the hospitality. The pleasure was all mine, Miss Evans, he said, with emphasis on the Miss Evans. I picked up my purse. I'm leaving. Meredith, recovering a shred of her arrogance, spat, You can't just expose us like this and walk away. I paused and looked at her over my shoulder. I didn't expose you. I just stopped hiding the truth to protect your son's fragile masculinity. You've been exposing yourselves for years. What a moment! If stories of strong women taking control of their destiny are what you're looking for, that's one more reason to subscribe, because this is the place for you. Let's see how Clara finishes this play. The New York air, thick and heavy, had never felt so light. As the taxi sped down the FDR drive, I didn't feel the rage I thought I would. I felt a cold calm, a surgical precision. The rooftop party wasn't the end, it was the catalyst. My first call, still in the cab, was to Eleanor Vance, my lawyer, a woman who spoke more in contractual clauses than in pleasantries. Eleanor, it's me. Initiate the scorched earth protocol. There was a pause on the other end. Are you certain, Clara? Once this starts, there's no going back. I am. Start first thing in the morning. I want everything ready. Understood? The legal notice will be on his desk by noon. I arrived at our apartment, his apartment, as Meredith loved to point out, long before James. The silence of the place was oppressive. I went straight to the home office, a room he'd decorated in mahogany and leather to look like a set from a movie about powerful men. I opened the wall safe hidden behind a tasteless abstract painting. The combination? His father's birthday. Predictable. Inside, among deeds and insurance policies, was what I was looking for. The convertible note agreement, the document that formalized the $8 million loan I'd made to his development company. I flipped through it, reliving the memory of a desperate James begging me for help 3 years ago. It's just a little push, honey. I'll pay you back as soon as the next project turns a profit. The project turned a profit, and others followed, but the money never came back. He conveniently forgot, and I, foolishly, had allowed it for the sake of peace in our marriage. I took out my phone and photographed every page of the contract, focusing especially on the default clause, the clause Eleanor and I had drafted so carefully. Then I placed the document back, untouched. The digital evidence was all I needed. Next, I went to our bedroom. I pulled out my suitcase and began packing, not with the haste of someone running away, but with the order of someone making a planned departure. Clothes, my books, my laptop. Only what was truly mine. When James finally walked in, I was sitting in the armchair in the living room, with my suitcase by my side. He looked smaller than he had at the party, the arrogance of the evening replaced by a poorly concealed desperation. "Clara?" His voice was a thread. "You're late," I replied, emotionless. His eyes darted from my face to the suitcase. Panic began to set in. What is this? You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life," I said, standing up. "You made your choice tonight, James, when you stood there silent while your mother tried to erase me from your life. Again." "I was trying to keep the peace," he protested, the same threadbare excuse. I laughed, a dry, joyless sound. "Keep the peace? James, your mother created the scene. She humiliated me in front of dozens of people. She called me your friend, and you did nothing. As usual." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture. "It's complicated. You know how my mother is." "No, James. It's not complicated. It's simple. You're a coward." The word hit him like a slap. His lies flashed. "Watch your mouth." "I'm done watching my mouth," I retorted, grabbing the handle of my suitcase. "I've spent years watching my mouth, so I wouldn't hurt your ego, so I wouldn't outshine your brilliance, so I wouldn't upset your mommy. And what did it get me? Public humiliation." I walked past him toward the door. And then he played his final card, the threat. "If you walk out that door, you can forget everything," he said, his voice low and menacing. "If you think you're getting a single penny from me in this divorce, you are sorely mistaken. I will leave you with nothing." I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and turned slowly, a genuine smile finally forming on my face. "Oh, James! You really should get into the habit of reading the contracts you sign." Confusion washed over his face. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the default clause in our little loan agreement, the one you signed without reading because you were too desperate. The clause states that in the event of non-repayment after 24 months, a deadline that passed a year ago, the debt could be converted into equity, specifically 51% of the shares in Apex Development." The color drained from his face. He seemed to age 10 years in 10 seconds. "I let you play with my company," I continued, savoring every word. "I let you pose as the great developer. But playtime is over. Tomorrow, my lawyer is executing the clause. I don't want my money back, James." I paused, letting the weight of the truth sink in. "I want my company." He staggered back, bracing himself against the well. He thought the power was his, the money, the name, the security. He never realized it was all a house of cards, and I was holding the foundation. You can't do this," he stammered. "I already have," I replied, opening the door. "I'm not taking a penny from you in the divorce. I'm taking what is already mine. The apartment, by the way, is owned by the company. And as of tomorrow, the company is mine. I suggest you start looking for a new place to live." He stared at me, shock turning into pure terror. The man who let me be humiliated to keep the peace was about to lose everything. "Why?" he whispered, the final question of a defeated man. "Because tonight," I said before walking out and closing the door behind me, "I finally decided to pay myself what I'm worth with interest." 2 months later, I was sitting in the corner office of Apex Development, now rebranded as Prisma Real Estate Capital. The leather chair was more comfortable than I'd imagined. From the panoramic window, the same view from that rooftop party now looked different. It was no longer a stage for my humiliation. It was my domain. The transition had been a short, brutal storm. James, guided by Meredith, had tried to fight it in court, claiming undue influence, duress, any legal term their desperate lawyer could find. But against an ironclad contract and Eleanor Vance's counsel, their arguments dissolved like sugar in the rain. The board of directors, led by Mr. Sterling himself, ratified my position as majority shareholder and CEO in a meeting that lasted less than 15 minutes. Meredith had tried her final weapon, social influence. She called columnists, peddling a story of a gold-digging opportunist. But the world she valued so much has a simple rule. It follows the money. And the money was now with me. The doors that closed for her swung wide open for me. I was reviewing the prospectus for a new project, one with realistic projections and sound capital, when my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. A number I hadn't blocked yet. James. The text was short, pathetic. My mother's blood pressure spiked. She's bedridden from the stress. I don't know what to do, Clara. I've lost everything. For a moment, I remembered the man I once fell in love with. But the image was quickly replaced by his cowardly figure standing silently as his mother wounded me. The pity I was supposed to feel wasn't there. There was just a void, the absence of any feeling. He was no longer my problem. I picked up the phone and typed back my reply, slowly and deliberately. For her blood pressure, I suggest a good cardiologist. For your situation, a good career counselor. The market is full of opportunities for those willing to start over. I hit send, and finally, I blocked his number. Meredith had wanted to teach me my place. In the end, she succeeded. My place was right here, in the seat of power, at the top of the empire I had saved and now owned. I was no longer a dear friend at the party. I was the one hosting it, and my celebration was just beginning. And stories like Clara's of strength and reversal connect us no matter where we are in the world. Speaking of which, I'd love to know which city or country you're watching this journey from. Let me know down in the comments so we can see just how far these stories of strength travel. If you also believe that no one should define your worth, show your support by leaving a like. It helps our channel grow and bring you more narratives just like this one. And of course, if you're not part of our community yet, don't wait any longer. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you never miss a single comeback. Until the next story.